Hello, I'm Will, and you know who I am by now. How is everybody? I'm doing something a bit special today. My top 20 films based on books. So some of these you will know, some of them you've probably never heard of, some of them you may never know that they were based on books, and one of them might be a bit controversial. So, where do we start? Let's start with Godfather. The book of this is spectacular, but the film is probably slightly better known than the book. This is a classic gangster film. This comes out of a box set that actually belongs to my mother that I've borrowed because it's brilliant, and I've watched the Godfather trilogy many times in my life, and I love them. So number 1 is The Godfather. Number 2 is Drive. This is basically the book on screen. This is a phenomenal indie film. It's extremely dark, very violent, and a lot of people for some reason thought this would be like Fast and the Furious. And a lot of people were really annoyed, and it's really not like Fast and the Furious. It's a slow burn, it's dark and it's violent, and it's brilliant. One Day. I love the book and I love the film. Controversial, I know. One Day for me is, yeah, her accent is a little bit weird, but I think they perfectly capture the book and the mood of the book. But her accent is weird. It's very off in places. A film that I actually think is better than the book, Beautiful Creatures. They changed a hell of a lot from the book to the screen, but actually I prefer it. The books are very frustrating reads for me, and the film streamlines it down. Though I do like the books, but they are frustrating reads in places, where this just kind of trims things down and brings it to the forefront. This tanked at the box office, but it is actually a very enjoyable film. LA Confidential. Brilliant again. Again, an 18 for a reason. It's very dark, very violent, but it captures the book perfectly. They make a lot of changes from the book, but in the best way, because the book is quite strong. And I don't mean that it's strong, but in places it kind of goes off canter, and they removed it and they changed some characters around. So, LA Confidential. The Host. This tanked at the box office, but I really enjoyed it. The ending was a bit of a cop-out, but then again I can say that of the book as well. But it actually is a very enjoyable film and a romp, and it's very action-oriented like the book is. So yeah, The Host. The Great Gatsby, the Baz Luhrmann version. There is a version with Robert Redford that's terrible, that's so flat and dry, and this is opulent and rich and interesting, and it does the book beautiful justice. I've never seen the book just on screen before. That's me being really honest, and the music, the soundtrack to this is just, Cloud Atlas. A phenomenal book, one of my favourite books actually, and one of my favourite films. They changed the end, which is not a spoiler, and this is one of the most expensive independent films ever made. It's one of those films you have to watch a few times to understand it, but you suddenly realise everything links together in the most beautiful and poignant and poetic way. Trainspotting. What can I say about this film that's never been said before? The book is phenomenal. It's written in a Scottish accent, so I'd recommend that maybe as an audiobook if you're American or struggle with accents, because I know Americans do tend to struggle with them, and I think they struggle with these films. But it is very good. How I Live Now. Phenomenal What If Britain Was Invaded. It's done in such a unique way that you feel very involved with these characters, and it's so strong. Practical Magic. This is probably more well known than the book, but the book is a phenomenal little read that actually spans more time, where the film is a more condensed down version of the story, where the film takes place across probably about, I want to say about 5-6 years. This takes place over the course of probably a few weeks. But I do think this is actually a little better than the book. Controversial, although the book does have an official prequel, which is really interesting and definitely worth picking up if you see the book. Children of Men. In a world where very few people know this is actually based on a book to begin with. Again, a more streamlined version of the book. The book gives you more detail, but it's set in a world where fertility is stopped. There have been no children born, and essentially people are dying. To be blunt about it, the human race is heading towards extinction because there are no children. And that's what it does. The film changes a lot, it simplifies things, but it actually streamlines it down beautifully, and definitely worth watching. The Lovely Bones. She dies. She gets killed by a serial killer, pedophile, and she watches the fallout from her death in limbo. The book follows the same narrative. It's very similar. Again, they do take a few liberties here and there, but it's so beautifully done and so poignant and so just beautiful. It's a really beautiful film, and really, I'm going to say really a lot. It broke my heart watching it. Romeo and Juliet, well, Romeo plus Juliet, an adaptation of, this is basically the book on screen with a contemporary setting. If you have not seen this, do check it out. I won't say any more, but it's brilliant. Cowboys and Aliens. This is based on the graphic novel of the same name. I think this does it actually is far better. They only take the basic concept and expand it brilliantly. It sounds really goofy, but it's really enjoyable and really fun. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the remake. This is a complicated one. This film was probably only made because Americans don't see movies with subtitles. The original trilogy made no money in America, and I think that's the reason this got made. To me, despite some weird casting choices, this does it really well and is a really good way of watching the first book on screen. And the soundtrack this wins just because of the soundtrack. Basically, it's Trent Reznor. I mean, he's God at the end of the day, so Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Although I will say, I think with the originals, they're slightly deeper because you get the whole trilogy rather than just the first book. Blade Runner. My preferred version of Blade Runner is the final cut. There are different versions of this film, but I prefer this one. It's based on the novel by Philip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. This is only the loosest adaptation. There's very little, other than characters and setting, and a little bit of the story, there's very little from the novel. The novel is a slow-boiled detective noir, and this is the same, but it changes things beautifully, and there's very little I can say about this that won't give too much away. And the final three. Jurassic Park. I really dislike the book. Don't ask me why, I hate the book, but I love the film, and I think the film does it so much better than the book. And it kills me to say that the film does it better. The Devil Wears Prada. Again, a film that does it better than the book. Just saying. It's brilliant. It's more fleshed out. The book feels quite shallow in places. This kind of streamlines it and fleshes it out a bit more. And Tenderness. This is a brilliant novel. I love the book, and essentially this is the book on screen with one of the roles expanded upon. Definitely worth checking out, and definitely worth being... I think everyone should at least give this one a go. It's very dark. That was my 20, but I'm going to give some honourable mentions because there are so many films I could put in this list. So my honourable mentions include The Crow, and a phenomenal comic book film. There's so much I could say about this that's been said already that I wouldn't really be saying anything new. Just go and watch this film, like now. Rust and Bone. Definitely a loose take on the book. It's a book of short stories, and this combines them in quite an interesting way, two of them particularly. and it kind of does a bit of a gender flip, but it's so well done. Perks of Being a Wallflower. This is an ex-library copy that I picked up in a charity shop. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is one of my favourite books, and I think the film is phenomenal. It's very much the teenage experience that deals. I always thought it was unfilmable because of the nature of it. Stardust, based on the Neil Gaiman novel. It softens the book slightly. You can tell they the film is aimed at a slightly younger audience than the book, but it's still a brilliant film. Plus, Take That, Do Rule the World, and end credits, and that's just a phenomenal song. Interview with a Vampire. Anne Rice, she is amazing, and what can you say? And this is a phenomenal take on it. They're also being developed into a TV series right now, so who knows what will come of that. And finally, Fight Club. I love the book. I love the film. I don't truly understand them, but in the best way possible, and I've watched this so many times in my life. So yeah, they're my honourable mentions. So, tell me what you think of my list, guys. It was really hard to make. There was probably easily about 30 other films I could put in that list that I love. Interview with a Vampire, Layer Cake, and stuff like that. But I feel like they've been talked about. You can go on about Anne Rice for hours on BookTube. So I wanted to show you ones that maybe you weren't aware of. But if you guys want to see more of this, please tell me in the comments below. And yeah, like and subscribe as always. Bye.